Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1984 cult classic, Repo Man. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Vontae for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you'd like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, Repo Man is one of those films that has become a cult classic, and I definitely feel it deserves its status. I think it's a great film. I thought it was a really unique, clever, entertaining, wild ride of a movie. It's directed by Alex Cox, who also wrote the film's screenplay. And Alex Cox's direction in this is particularly impressive, and the reason for that is because this was his directorial debut. This is a very off the wall, outlandish, over the top, hard sell of a movie, and Alex Cox really pulled it off. And a big reason why the film works is because of Alex. In fact, you could argue that's the main reason why it works. Because it was Alex's idea, based on his time working as a repo man. And he was the one that decided to change it last minute from a road trip movie to a film that just takes place mostly within Los Angeles. He's also the one that brought a certain signature visual style to it that had a fair amount of ambitious and risky shots, but a lot of grit, a lot of rawness, and a lot of direction in terms of the techniques that really emphasize the whole punk aesthetic and just the renegade nature of the movie. And not only is it impressive technically in terms of the way that he utilizes his shot selection, the way that he uses pans or zooms or different perspectives or different ways to position the camera. It's also an impressive feat of filmmaking because of the fact that not only is he dealing with a very low budget when it comes to the production of the film, but he's also dealing with a studio that has essentially given up on the movie prior to the film starting its journey when it comes to its shoot, but also a production that's just marred with so many problems. You got a co-star in Harry Dean Stanton, who is an absolute tyrant to work with. You've got other various problems throughout the production. You've got a production that deals with a signature part and a signature piece of the film going missing during the shoot in the car. The car got stolen at some point while they were filming the Chevy Malibu, so they had to scramble and find a replacement. But through some crazy coincidence or series of events, the car that was stolen wound up being found again. So now they had two cars to work with for the shoot. So it turned out to actually be a positive instead of being a total disaster. And you also have the cinematographer who is going around and doing his own thing and not cooperating with Alex to the point where the two literally butted heads at one point during the film's production. So you have a production that's just littered with so many issues. You've got a script that was retooled pretty much last minute. You've got a lot of dialogue that is just heavily improvised because that's what Alex wanted the cast to do. So that really makes a lot of other elements of the script not really viable, because that dialogue isn't really being utilized. So what you have is a lot of, okay, let's kind of figure it out on the fly kind of stuff. You've got a star in Harry Dean Stanton who doesn't want to work with the director and thinks that he's above the director and above the production and the way that he's behaving. You've got a cinematographer who is just fucking off and doing his own thing. And then you have a studio who just doesn't really care about the movie. Because initially the film was greenlit and there was a different owner at Universal who was more enthusiastic about the project. But while they were shooting the film, ownership changed. And now you had a guy who's running Universal who's like, what is this movie? What is this film about? Who is the star? Whatever. And you got a film that doesn't really have like the faith of the studio. So yeah, in a lot of ways, this is as close as you can get to an indie film, despite it being released by a major studio in Universal, because the film did get a theatrical release, but it got no marketing because the studio pretty much gave up on it before it even was ultimately released. But Alex Cox didn't. He had faith in this film, and it really does show when it comes to his direction and the way that he handled everything. It's really impressive when you consider everything he dealt with, because a lesser filmmaker would have crashed this car, and it would have been very obvious that he wasn't up to the task. Alex Cox also wrote the screenplay, and I think he did a spectacular job with it for the most part. It's a screenplay that, in my opinion, excels when it comes to doing the opposite. When it comes to playing with conventions and really turning things on their head. A lot of Repo Man is really centered around being a punk film, being a movie that is anti-establishment. And the way that it does that is really clever, because it does that by twisting traditional conventions when it comes to the plot that you would typically see in a film, and characters and other elements. This is why the fact that it doesn't have a lot of character depth, or it has a very vague plot, it doesn't wind up being something that ultimately is detrimental to the film, because that's done by design. A lot of these things that come across as maybe random or just not necessarily connected incidents or moments to the bulk or the core of the overall story, it still clicks, it still works, because that's the whole point. It's trying to be unique. It's trying to be something different when it comes to its approach to storytelling. But I still feel that there's some really cohesive, strong core elements. And those really involve the sci-fi plot with the alien corpses that are in the back of the Chevy Malibu, and the different forces that are trying to find this car, and the Repo Man, and specifically the Repo Man in Otto. I think the script does a really good job of making you connect with Otto from the very beginning. When you show him working at this dead-end job at a retail store, at a supermarket, dealing with an annoying coworker, and eventually just reaching his breaking point to the point where he just quits in a rage and even flips off the boss, gives him the double bird. And I thought that was really cathartic. And as somebody who's worked in retail, it was wish fulfillment. Like, if you've ever worked in a bad retail job, man, you totally relate to Otto. And that becomes something that you really wish that you could do and get away with. Just be like, nah, fuck you. I'm gone. I'm out of here. And you understand why Otto is disillusioned. You understand why he ultimately gets wrapped up in the craziness that ultimately unfolds when it comes to this plot. I think the script does a really good job making this character into somebody that is likable despite his flaws. Like, he's not the nicest guy. He's kind of an asshole, but it does a good job explaining and detailing why he is the way that he is. And it seems like, yeah, he's kind of rough and he's kind of a jerk, but he's also kind of justified because of the cards that he was dealt when it comes to his place in society. And I like the scenes where he's learning the ropes when it comes to being a repo man. I love that he just gets roped into being a repo man without his knowledge. I thought that was really funny. And then I love how he tries to do another big, grand, fuck you kind of moment when he realizes that he was tricked into being a repo man. And there are people who work at the repo place and they're offering him a job. And he tries to do the same sort of thing that he did at the supermarket, where he makes this big show and he pours beer on the floor and basically tells everybody to fuck off. But unlike what happened at the supermarket, that just makes him more endearing to the people that work at the repo place and more willing to want to give him the job, which I thought was really funny. And all the while you have this other plot that's going on with these alien corpses and this car that has these corpses in the trunk that cause people to disintegrate. And the script does a great job just being very vague with that and not really over explaining things. And I think that's a really important aspect of this script, is that there's a certain mysteriousness to it, and it helps it be more unpredictable and be more unique in terms of the way that it tells the tale. And I love that there's a lot of room for just really funny, witty lines of dialogue and interactions with characters. I love how you have these different sort of warring factions, so to speak, that are trying to get these alien corpses or get the car. You got this government clandestine operation. You have this other operation that seems like it's pro UFO, pro alien. And then you got the Repo Man and the Repo Man that are just wrapped up into all of this, and they just want to get the car for the reward, because there's like a $20,000 reward that's now on the car, so they want that so they can, you know, keep the doors open on the business, or fund their own ventures, or keep food on the table, or pay rent. And I like that there's variations of the Repo Men too. There's the Repo Men that Otto works with, and then there's also these other Repo Men that they're competing with. And I love how the car just changes hands throughout the script, where it'll be in the hands of one of these other Repo Men. So initially, you'll have it be in the hands of Bud, but then these other guys will get a hold of it, these Hispanic guys, and then these group of punkers, they'll get a hold of the car, and then it gets back into the hands of a Bud, or it gets into the hands of Otto, and then ultimately it just winds up in the hands of nobody except for, the hands of Miller, the guy who seems like he's just spouting conspiracy theories and just absolute nonsense. But by the end of the film, you realize that he actually is smarter and actually is more aware of what's actually going on than a lot of other people are. And I love the ending of the movie. I think it's an ending that I think other people might not necessarily be as fond of because of how random it appears, but I love it because it's just so out there and unexpected. Where you got this glowing car, the car now is completely glow in the dark, and it looks like it's just straight up radioactive. And you got this guy he seems like he's crazy, Miller, and he's sitting there in the driver's seat, and Otto, he joins him, and they both go on this just wild ride at the end of the movie where they're just flying through the city in this glowing car, and then they go up into space. And it doesn't make a ton of sense, and there's no real explanation for why any of this is happening. But it fits because so much of this film is about doing the opposite. Like, even prior to Otto going into the car, it completely twists things when it comes to this love story that it seems like the plot has been building. The script has been building this love story between Otto and Layla. But at the end, Otto, after Layla's asking Otto whether or not he loves her, Otto basically tells her to fuck off and gets into the glowing car with Miller. And Layla is then upset because that's what she wanted to do. She felt like the ride was hers. So now she's just pissed at Otto. So it just completely destroys whatever convention you might have had in mind when it comes to these two characters. And even some of the stuff involving the punkers earlier, where it seemed like they were established as friends or confidants for Otto. So you would think that maybe things would wind up working out for them, or they might be involved more in the finale. But that isn't the case at all. And I like that there's this manic, just over the top reverend character who's this televangelist, and how he's also somehow connected to the government, and how they're trying to get these aliens, and he tries to go up to the car and tries to exorcise whatever demons he thinks is inside of it, and all he gets is just alien electricity for his trouble. And I just feel that there's just a lot of things about this script that are really clever and unique, and it's all centered around this, in a lot of ways, kind of generic plot about the life of a repo man, like the average day of a repo man. But you have this alien thing going on and these sci-fi elements, and you've got other elements of subtext that are thrown in there about Reaganism and about the atomic age. And even though there's subtext, it never really comes across like a pretentious film, because it's still just very over the top and kind of silly at times, but it works. It really does. And the moments of black comedy and dark humor that are utilized throughout the script are really funny. And yeah, despite there being a lot of characters in this that are very unscrupulous or just not really the best people, uh and they just have a lot of rough edges, there's still aspects of them that you root for and you find likable. And it's just overall a really unique and genuinely original script. And Alex Cox deserves all the credit in the world for piecing everything together. And the film also features a really talented cast. It's headlined by Emilio Estevez in one of his first major film roles as Otto. Yes, he was in some other stuff, but like this was one of his first major starring roles. And you could definitely tell that he was a star in the making here because he effectively was able to portray this character who's a troubled youth, who's a guy who is not necessarily, let's just say, the most polite individual, to say the least. He's got these aspects of his character that are less than desirable for many, but he still brings a certain charisma to the character. He still brings a certain charm to the character. So, despite some of these aspects of his character that are kind of ugly, he makes the character into an endearing person, makes Otto into somebody that you ultimately root for and you genuinely do care about, and in large parts because of what Emilio brings to that role. And you have Harry Dean Stanton, who I guess you would say is the biggest name when it comes to this cast, and I thought his performance was great. He was a lot of fun. uh, I felt that he had chemistry with Emilio and everyone else in the cast, and they all worked together well. And I was honestly surprised to know that he was such a problem when it comes to this production. Apparently, he and Alex Cox didn't really get along that well. They were constantly at odds throughout the production. At one point, he felt like he was above it all to the point where he suggested that he would read off of cue cards because Warren Oates did it in Two-Lane Blacktop. And so he felt like, well, because Warren Oates did that and I know Warren Oates, I should be able to do that too. And Alex Cox is like, what? No, you're not. I'm not going to supply you cue cards for your scenes in this movie. Act like a professional. And he Harry was not budging. He was not acting like a professional at all. So Alex just lied to him and told him that he has to remember his lines because it's a SAG law. Like according to SAG rules, you have to remember your lines. You can't use cue cards. And Harry bought it and remembered his lines and didn't use cue cards, but the just insubordinance from Harry Dean Stanton, it didn't stop there because there was another scene where he has a baseball bat and he's swinging it around, and apparently he almost hit Alex with the bat or hit someone else on the set, and Alex had enough and he was like, give me that bat. You're not using a bat anymore. We're not using real bats. And Harry got pissed off and was upset about that. And it got to the point where Alex just switched bats without Harry knowing one day when they were doing a reshoot. And you're just like, this is insane. So you switched bats, and Harry wound up using a fake bat for the next scene, and I guess Harry just dealt with it, and it got so bad to the point where Alex almost fired him. Like Alex was at his wits' end. He had had enough of Harry Dean Stanton's shit and was like, "Get this guy off my set." And the studio and the producers were like, whoa, 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 whoa. We need Harry. He's like a big name. He's one of the only big recognizable names we have in this cast. It's too late to rewrite or write this character out of the story. He's very important. He's very vital to it. We'll talk to Harry. We'll get something worked out. And I guess eventually Harry calmed down enough for them to, finish the shoot. But I just find that to be insane that Harry Dean Stanton was like the ultimate diva on the set of Repo Man of all things. But despite all of that, it was still a good performance. I think it was worthy of putting up with because I honestly feel it's one of my favorite performances by Harry Dean Stanton as Bud. But goddamn, like what a piece of work when it comes to his professional work ethic. Tracey Walter, though, was not a problem to work with as Miller. Tracey Walter, you might recognize him. He was Bob in Batman. He was a lot of fun in this as the conspiracy theory guy who you think is just crazy, but it turns out he's not as crazy as you think. Olivia Barash, I liked her as Layla. She had a certain quirky nature to her that I really liked, and I felt the scenes between her and Otto were fun and effective. Cy Richardson did a solid job as Light. Vanetta McGee was there as Marlene. Richard Forenagy is Otto. Fox Harris, he's in this as a guy named J. Frank Parnell. I think J. Frank Parnell was the guy who's driving around the car. And I think at one point they were considering Lance Henriksen, or he was like maybe a second choice for that role. That would have been interesting to have seen Lance Henriksen as the guy who's driving around the irradiated car that's got 3 alien bodies in the back. Um, the guy who ultimately did play the role did a fine job, but Lance Henriksen I think would have had a stronger screen presence. I think at one point, speaking of potential cast members, I think they were considering Dennis Hopper to play Bud, but Dennis Hopper at this point he was known to have a serious drug problem, and they didn't really want to deal with that. So they ultimately went with Harry Dean Stanton, which is funny because Harry Dean Stanton was an absolute pain in the ass to work with anyway. So they still had an actor who played Bud, who was still problematic. But yeah, really solid cast for the most part, despite the fact that there was just a lot of crap that Alex had to deal with a certain cast member. The film also features some cinematography by Robbie Mueller. And what's crazy is I don't really feel that the shots that Robbie utilizes in this film really seem like they're that far off from what Alex's vision was for the movie. Like you hear from Alex and he's talking about how he was shooting things in a way that he didn't want at all, and ultimately they just didn't get along and they weren't on the same page. And when you see the film, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of moments where the cinematography is jarring or it's just so tonally opposite of what the rest of the film is when it comes to Alex's direction. So I don't know what precisely went wrong because it's hard to really see. Because when you see the film itself, like it doesn't look like it's an instance of two people's visions that are colliding with one another in every scene. It looks fairly consistent, and I think Robbie did a good job of showcasing just the seedy, grimy setting of Los Angeles and the Repo Place and a lot of other parts of the movie that I felt really did make the film have this very striking visual style. And I think the editing by Dennis Dolan is really dynamic and really strong in its own right. Really matches the film's punk aesthetic in terms of the way that scenes are edited and placed together, and really adds to just the overall surreal nature of the film. And it's got a okay score by Stephen Huffester and Humberto Larivia, but really the film soundtrack is not really a lot of original music in terms of like original compositions from a composer. It's more songs like punk rock, hard rock songs for the soundtrack. In fact, Iggy Pop even did the theme for the film. And it just adds so much to the movie. It just makes the film even cooler. It makes it match what Alex is trying to do with making a punk rock uh dark comedy, and it just makes it into something that's all the more special and unique because of the soundtrack. I mean, this is a great soundtrack. I mean, you got so many talented, really strong acts and bands that worked on the soundtrack. I mean, you got Black Flag, you got Circle Jerks, you got Iggy Pop, you've got I think Fear also did some stuff for the film, and yeah, the film score was created by members of the band The Plugs. So even the film score is by punk rock musicians. So yeah, I love this soundtrack. It's honestly one of my favorites when it comes to a film like this, and from the 80s. It's a really good listen, especially if you're a fan of punk rock. And it's got a really good pace to it. It's not that long of a film. In fact, it's pretty short. And it's just a really wild, out there, crazy, fun movie. It's a film that really does showcase how the realm of cinema can create something that is just so totally unique and one of a kind. And I also highly recommend this set from Criterion if you're a fan of the film, for sure, and even if you're just kind of wanting to watch it just for like a blind buy, because this is just a great Blu-ray, really good Blu-ray set from Criterion. Um, it's an older release. It's from 2013, but it's aged really well. I mean, I just love that cover art. It's a great poster. And it's got a really good 2K restoration, ton of features, commentary tracks, deleted scenes, roundtable discussion about the making of the movie, interviews with various different people who worked on the film, and then you have this slip. This is the case for the Blu-ray, and it just matches the punk rock aesthetic just perfectly. I just love it. It's so cool. And then you got that, and then down the back, and then you got this is the booklet, which has a bunch of other things. Like, as you can see, I think it's like a lot of writing, like just journals and writing, I believe maybe from Alex Cox when it comes to the film, or they just made the booklet and the writing match the aesthetic of the set. It's just a really cool looking set from Criterion. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Repo Man, and until next time, I'll see you later.